Welcome to all the fanfare. My name is Eric Pierce. Today we're talking about Tecmo Super Bowl, which came out in 1991, and I recently rediscovered it and have been religiously, one might say obsessively replaying it to the point where my family is starting to get concerned for my mental well-being, starting to wonder if daddy's having some kind of midlife crisis because, pretty much any spare time I've had lately, I've spent manipulating 8-bit football players around a two-dimensional field and crushing the competition because, you can dominate in this game. Before we get to all that, I do just want to mention this is the 10th episode of the podcast. Kind of hard to believe. Been doing it for 2.5 months now, and I think we're hitting our stride. I'm excited about some of the upcoming guests I have, and I think it's going really well. If you dig this vibe I'm putting out in the universe, you can support the pod $3 a month, and that unlocks all sorts of wonderful. Is it conceited to call my own articles wonderful? I'm gonna do it. Wonderful articles about pop culture. Many of them are long reads. You get a taste of my personality in the pod, but in the articles, I go even crazier. And I like to make things fun. So $3 a month, you'll unlock access to over 30 exclusive articles that are available nowhere else. By the way, you can do that at allthefanfare.com. And I drop a couple, 2-3 new exclusive articles every month, available only to paid supporters. I would appreciate that. If you like the pod, make sure you leave a review, leave a rating. Head over to newsletter.allthefanfare.com. The pods are posted there. That's on Substack. You can leave comments. If you want to comment directly about something I say on the podcast, that's where you can do that. So we're talking about Tecmo Bowl. And although this podcast is about Tecmo Super Bowl, which is the superior version of the game, a lot of us players, us diehards, just refer to it as Tecmo Bowl because it's shorter and sweeter and it just sounds cool. But Tecmo Bowl is a game series that came out, originally started as a 4-player arcade game and was ported to the original Nintendo, the Nintendo Entertainment System, which I'm going to refer to as NES because it's shorter and sounds cool, was ported to the NES in 1989. At that point, there was only 12 teams in the game, and the game didn't have the license to the NFL license, so they're just called like Miami or New York or Chicago, not the Bears or, whatever. But it did have the NFLPA license, so you had the players, Bo Jackson, notably for the Raiders, people like Joe Montana for the 49ers, they're in the game. And I think, if you had to choose one or the other, the NFL license was a player license. Going with the player license was the smarter move because when you are playing these games, you tend to pick your teams. So I pick the lines in when I can, but you're really playing the players because that's what you love about the teams. But this original version of Tecmo Bowl for the Nintendo was a very arcadey game. There's only 9 players to a side. So if you're familiar with American football, there's 11 players to a side, offense and defense. So the original Tecmo Bowl was very arcadey. It maintained that arcade essence from the original arcade game, and it plays like an arcade game. It's very, very fast, very loose, very high scoring. There were only 4 offensive plays in Tecmo Bowl. So the way all these Tecmo Bowl games work, you're presented with a play screen, and you can choose 2 running plays or 2 pass plays. And that's what you're doing on offense. And on defense, you're trying to guess what the opponent is choosing. And if you guess right as a defense, then all your guys just rush the quarterback or the ball carrier and usually take them out for a loss. Some of the better players can actually turn those plays into touchdowns anyway just because they're awesome. But that's just the general gist. Tecmo Super Bowl, which is the real topic, the meat of this pod, and the game I've been addicted to for like 2 or 3 weeks now, came out in 1991. It's by far the best Tecmo Bowl. It's actually, we're going to cover this later in the pod, it's actually one of the best Nintendo games, period. One of the best sports games, maybe the best. We're going to talk about that. So when most times, if people are talking about Tecmo Bowl, they're actually talking about Tecmo Super Bowl, because for those Tecmo Bowl aficionados that know a thing or two, this is the game. It has both the NFLPA license and the NFL license, so you're playing as the Detroit Lions and you're controlling Barry Sanders. It is full 11-on-11 action, so it's, you got the full complement of players, including offensive linemen. The playbook was expanded. It was blown out to a full 8 plays, which if you played Madden anytime recently sounds crazy, because the Madden playbook, I don't know, I haven't played Madden in a few years, but there's probably 30 offensive plays that you can choose from in Madden. And honestly, there's something, I think the reason I've been reconnecting with this game so much is there's just something kind of beautiful about the simplicity of Tecmo Super Bowl, the way the game is set up. There's only 8 offensive plays, and because you're not kind of dealing with analysis paralysis, it allows the gameplay, the actual action on the field, to elevate. And it's coming back to it after spending years playing Madden. It's just really been enjoyable. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. What else? This is the game that taught me about the flea flicker. So flea flicker, if you don't know, by the way, there's going to be a lot of football talk in this podcast. It's kind of unavoidable. But a flea flicker is a trick play where the quarterback hands the ball to the running back, and then the running back runs forward as though he's going to, bust a run. And then after a couple steps, he turns and pitches the ball back to the quarterback. And it's a fake out, because now it looked like a run play. It's actually a pass play. And done well, your wide receivers, the guys who catch the ball, are going to be wide open, probably for a touchdown. This is the game that put flea flicker on my map, on my radar. And in fact, because of the time I played this, I grew up watching football, but Tecmo Super Bowl really kind of put me in touch with what football is, how it's played, a number of the players that I hadn't maybe known as well, and then all the teams. You get in all that with this game. So it's a good crash course for NFL football, at least in 1991. Just to close the loop on this kind of varieties of Tecmo Bowl, the Tecmo Super Bowl on the original Nintendo is the superior version. It's the ultimate version. Tecmo did release a version of Tecmo Super Bowl on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, I believe in 93. And because it's going from 8-bit to 16-bit graphics, the graphics look twice as good technically, but something's lost in the translation. The speed of the game is dialed back, I'm gonna say like 25%, and it's noticeable. It feels less arcadey and more simulationist, which maybe is good. I had some fun playing it in the last couple of weeks. I fired it up and played it a couple of times just because I was curious how it played, and it feels a bit more realistic in terms of your guys just don't get the separation that they do in the Nintendo version. And I don't know. It's crazy because I tend to like my games to reflect reality, but I think when they dialed back the arcadiness of the game, you really lost some of the magic. And then there were some subsequent versions that came out, Tecmo Super Bowl 2 and 3, that further just added on features, deeper playbooks, options to create your own players and those things, which sound awesome on paper, but really it just kind of watered down the experience and moved further away from what made the game so amazing. Let's talk about some of those things real quick here. So just so you're aware, Tecmo Super Bowl has some idiosyncrasies, some of them which made sense for the time that it was made in 1991. Some of it doesn't, but it kind of is there to make the game more enjoyable, essentially. So there's no touchbacks on kickoff. So you could catch the ball at the back of your end zone. You have to return it no matter what. That's just the way the game works. So a lot of times on kickoffs, it's pretty common to see people downed inside their 10-yard line on a kickoff because the coverage is so good and so fast that a lot of times you're kind of just screwed if they have a good kick. Alternatively, you can't return any punts that end up landing in the end zone. Those are automatic touchbacks. And that's for game balance reasons, because a lot of times the punt coverage is so good that there's like 4 guys breathing down your neck as soon as you catch the ball, and those would be instant safeties otherwise. So that's a move for gameplay reasons. You have limited ability to move players around, so there is some roster management. I'm gonna say roster management light built into the game, where you can put running backs in at wide receiver and vice versa. You can sub in and out guys, and especially since this game has injuries, sometimes that's necessary. Unfortunately, only offensive players can return kicks, which I was devastated to discover. I was playing the Atlanta Falcons, and this is Deion Sanders' prime time, at his most prime time. Those are his years, and I was so disappointed that I couldn't put him in as punt returner, because that was kind of his deal. Like, he was amazing as a cornerback, and then as a punt returner. Unfortunately, you can't do that with him, so it's kind of a bummer. I think because they're stressing the Nintendo system to they're stretching the capabilities of it, let's say. A lot of times you'll see the sprites on the field, the actual players, they'll flicker as though they're ghosts, or they're phasing in and out of reality, and they're still there, and you can run into them and stuff, but it just looks kind of janky a little bit. It doesn't really affect your game. It doesn't really affect your enjoyment, and in fact, you kind of get used to it, but it's there. If you break a long run, which you will at some point if you play this game for maybe 10 minutes, there's the way the AI pursues you, they run super fast in a straight line. So if you zigzag, like make dramatic up and down motions as you're running, they lose speed. And a lot of times they'll dive at you and miss then. So that's actually, even though in real life running in a straight line is the fastest way to run, in Tecmo Super Bowl and Tecmo Bowl, the original, doing the zigzag down the field is actually the most effective way. Speaking of other things that kind of break reality, quarterbacks have unlimited arm strength. Essentially, however far down the field your wide receiver is as far as your quarterback can throw. So you could actually hike the ball, run backwards into the back of your own end zone, and then launch the ball over 100 yards, and it will make it there to your guy. Whether or not he catches it is, that depends on if he's covered and if he's a good wide receiver. But the quarterback will get the ball there. And, that doesn't make any kind of sense, but it's freaking awesome. So you gotta love that. Blocking kicks is pretty easy if you have a fast outside linebacker or cornerback. 2-point conversions don't exist yet, so you can't do them because they don't exist yet. Limited roster management. I view this as a good thing, because there's no salaries, there's no salary cap, there's no trades. A lot of the Madden experience in recent years takes place outside the field. So you have the game itself, or the actual football games, and that's kind of the crown jewel. Like, that's why you're there. But then you probably spend, like, if a Madden game takes about an hour, which it does, you probably spend an hour and a half playing Madden to get to that game. So you have the hour where you're actually playing the football game, and then you, on either the front and back end, you maybe have half an hour where you're managing your roster due to injuries, you're looking at free agents, you're scouting for the college combine or for the young incoming draft class. Did I say making trades? Like, that's an option. All this stuff, salary cap, and then in some iterations of Madden, you have things where, are the fans happy? Do we need to, depending on, if you're playing just as a coach or as the GM, you kind of have this umbrella over all of it where you're managing your stadium, and you can change the price of concessions and just really crazy minutia. It just waters down the experience, and it's and this game has all this stuff, but I think the play of the game actually suffers a bit, and it's something that playing Tecmo Super Bowl has made me really appreciate. Is it's just laser focused on the game. There's a little tiny bit of roster management in that you've got a tiny roster and you can move a couple guys around if you want to, but that's essentially it. This is going to make me sound old as heck, but one of the quote unquote innovations that came with this game was you could save your season progress. So your season was persistent and you didn't need to memorize. Back in the day, save state was not really a thing with the original Nintendo games. So if your progress was saved, a lot of times you were given a code, like a long 13-digit code or something, 12-digit code that would save, quote unquote, save your progress. So then when you played again, you'd put the code in and then the game would quote unquote remember. But really it's queued up to know that, oh, if you put that code in, then this is where you should be in the story, the game, whatever. Tecmo Super Bowl actually saved your progress. So you could play through the 1991 NFL season week by week, and wherever you leave off, when you come back to it, that's where you are. On top of that, and what I really loved, because I guess I'm a numbers guy, a nerd for stats and stuff, but the game kept track of your stats. And so part of the fun of playing the game was seeing, oh, Barry Sanders had 200 yards rushing this game, and on the season he's up to 800 after 5 games, and he's leading the NFL in rushing, and my cornerback is leading the league in interceptions or whatever. It just added another layer to the game. And again, because it's focused on stats and stuff, it was outside the game, but it was still about the game. So when you came to the game, if you see your guys second in the league in sacks, you can come into the game saying, well, I'm gonna focus on trying to get more sacks this game because I want that number 1 spot. So it's kind of a game within the game, but it's just for the time, it was amazing. And playing it still in 2024, it's still freaking amazing. I mentioned at the top, the experience of playing this game now is interesting. It's hard to separate the nostalgia I feel for the game from like the actual experience playing it now. And kind of as an experiment, my son was walking through the house last weekend, and I said, hey, come in here for a second. I was in the living room playing. And I said, hey, do you want to play this game with me? And I was in the middle of the game, so he could see the screen. He saw what it looked like, and, it's NES graphics. So this is 8-bit technology. And the first system he probably has any memory of is the Xbox 360. I don't even know, like, in terms of, back in the day, you had the original Nintendo was 8-bit, Super Nintendo was 16-bit, Nintendo 64 was 64-bit, so that was a huge jump. And then after the 64, we got to the 3D technology, and you kind of got away from the bit as kind of a barometer for how powerful your system is. So I have no idea what the 360 would have been in terms of bit, but it was like maybe 1,000,000 bit. And I'm asking him to look at this. That was his first system, like that he has memory of, is 360. And so he comes in the room and I say, hey, you want to play this game with this really janky looking graphics? And he was super skeptical, but he was interested because it's football. And I asked him, I promised him, like, hey, it's a fun game. Like, you'll enjoy it. We played a game, and it took him a minute to get to grasp, how the game is played, because it is a bit rudimentary with the controls, and there's only 2 buttons that you use, and just how you, again, some of the idiosyncrasies, like how you zigzag down the field in order to like have a breakaway that gets to a touchdown. Some of those things I explained them to him, but until you see it yourself or experience it yourself, you don't really know what you're doing. I think he enjoyed it, but then when I said, let's run it back and play again, he's like, nah, I'm good. Maybe later. And then, of course, later never happened. I don't think that Tecmo Super Bowl is really a game that will, quote unquote, stand the test of time. I don't think future generations are going to look at this game as being what it is. It's one of the greatest sports game ever. But 30 years of progress and expectations about what games are, I think, has kind of eroded its ability to be timeless, unless you have those built-in feelings of nostalgia, like when the music fires up, like I'm already like there. The cut scene at the beginning of the game before anything happens. Like the first time I played this was 3 weeks ago. That was probably the first time I played it in several years. And maybe as many as 10. I don't know. And I knew it all by heart. Like I knew the music, I knew the cutscenes, I knew it was going to happen, and so I'm primed to love this game, and I recognize that, and so it's kind of hard to try to talk about it. And I mean, on one hand, it's easy for me to talk about it because I love it, but at the same time, this is definitely a your mileage may vary situation, because I don't I think unless you also have built-in feelings of nostalgia for the game, it's probably hard to look past some of the limitations of the technology, which frankly I view as benefits. I'm a lifelong gamer. I've played them all. I've played every major version of football video games. I know what works and what doesn't, and let me tell you, Tecmo Super Bowl just works. It's just the gameplay is fast and fluid, and if you're playing against a computer, you're probably going to blow them out more times than not. Sometimes they'll surprise you and you'll get blown out, and it'll make you appreciate that, okay, maybe you're not awesome, as awesome as you think you are. The experience is just really refreshing. It's nice to just pick up a game and play it for 15 minutes and know that when you're done, like you'll have played through a game and you can put it down and go on with your life. Granted, if you're me, you're probably going to play 3 or 4 games in a row because you're having so much fun. But at the end of it, you can put it down and walk away and feel fine. A lot of times, even when I played Madden, if I played a game of Madden, so I say I had an hour to play a game, there were times where that would ruin my day because there are Madden games where if you're a Madden player, you know what I'm talking about. There's the screw you game where the computer just says, no, I'm going to screw you because I feel like it, and so all kinds of bullcrap will happen, and it'll just put you in a bad mood. And you just wasted an hour going through that. Well, in Tecmo Super Bowl, there isn't really screw you games. Occasionally some stuff happens, but you only invested 15 minutes, and it's easy to fire up the next game and get that taste out of your mouth. Now, apart from the graphics and the gameplay, this game has an obvious retro feel, and because it's set during the 1991 season, it's definitely an artifact of its time. It's a snapshot into what the NFL looked like in 1991. At that time, there were only 28 teams, and they were spread across 6 divisions, East, Central, and West. So my Detroit Lions were in the NFC Central Division, and at that time, it looks rather like it does today. It was Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay, Minnesota, and then we also had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in our division, and that's the way it was for a long time until they went to 4 divisions. So playing this, you got the divisions, you got 20 teams, 6 divisions. The teams are different. So you have the Phoenix Cardinals, you have the LA Raiders, so they're in Vegas now, but for most of my life, they were the Oakland Raiders, but now at this time in 1991, they were the LA Raiders. The Chargers were still in San Diego. Now they're in Los Angeles. Washington Redskins. They're just, obviously they're not the Redskins anymore, but and then because it's set during the 1991 season, it has a number of who I consider the greatest players in NFL history. And again, part of that's probably built-in nostalgia because I was young when these guys were playing, and then therefore I view them with, maybe more love than they deserve. But at the same time, guys like Barry Sanders, Dan Marino, Joe Montana, Lawrence Taylor, Emmitt Smith, Deion Sanders. If you are a football fan from the 90s, the list of players in this game, it's a real who's who. And then the funny thing is so you've got all your named players, your Marinos and your Barry Sanders and guys like that. And then you've got a bunch of guys that sound like made-up athletes that the game just put in because you have no memory of these people. So just a list of some of these quarterbacks that I ran across when I was playing. Tim Rosenbach, the quarterback of the Phoenix Cardinals. B.J. Tolliver of the Chargers. Chris Miller of the Falcons. Those all just sound like average blokes, maybe made up names. I have no memory of any of them, and I was a big football fan at the time, so it's kind of funny to just play the game and see guys you remember put side by side with guys that have faded from history because they weren't that memorable to begin with, or it's just because it's been 30 years. But it's interesting how the game has kind of even immortalized guys who maybe played for 3 or 4 years and then went on to do something else. They live on forever because of this game. It's kind of a cool thing. So speaking of the rosters, so this game is so beloved. There is a number of tournaments around the country every year where hundreds of people get together to play Tecmo Super Bowl 1v1 for bragging rights, essentially, and maybe some cash prizes. But on top of that, there's a website, I believe it's tecmobowl.org, that updates the game every year to put out modern rosters. So you could download, I don't know if the 2024 rosters are out yet, but you could go out there and download the 2023 roster that would have Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers and Jahmyr Gibbs on the Detroit Lions and Mahomes on the Chiefs. And you could play a season like that, which I'll admit, like when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's cool. I'm definitely going to do that. I haven't done it yet because I don't know. There's something really cool about playing this game with the players that were in the NFL at that time. I don't know if it's a scratching my nostalgia thing. You know, right now I'm playing a season with the Dolphins. I'm using Dan Marino. He's throwing to Mark Clayton and Mark Super Duper. And it's just great seeing those guys' names again. It's almost like it brings them back to life. And again, I talked about, you know, how this game has like immortalized these players, but for real, it has. Like, all these guys are out of the NFL. I mean, I'm sure a number of these players are no longer with us, but they live on in this game, and I think that's just cool. I have a lot of memories of playing this game. I think it's tied up in my memories of childhood, specifically my early teen years, like maybe from like 11, 12 to like 13, 14, like that time frame. And when I think about like my favorite games of that era, this is in the list. Baseball Stars, which was on the original Nintendo. I love that game. NHL 94-95, Legend of Zelda, Mario Kart. Those are the games that are top of mind. And then later we get into stuff like GoldenEye 007 and then later Halo and, you know, on and on and on. But for this window of, you know, maybe 5 years, Tecmo Super Bowl is probably my favorite game. It's probably the game I have the most clear memories of playing, along with maybe with something like 007 GoldenEye. But I played it obsessively by myself, kind of like I'm doing right now, actually. But at the time, so my parents had gotten divorced, and through circumstances that I don't want to get into here, we ended up at separate houses. So I ended up living with my mom and my stepfather, and my brother lived with my dad and my stepmother. And so we were separated for 2 years, and we were best bros back in those days. Essentially, we only had each other to rely on. And so when we were split up, that was hard. We would see each other every other weekend. So one weekend I'd go to my dad's house and he would be there. And then the following weekend I'd be at my mom's house and he would come there. And those were the good weekends because mom's house was better and mom was better. And also mom had all the toys. Like, that's where the Nintendo was. So essentially, unless it was that every other weekend, I spent a lot of time by myself playing this game, basically, is what it amounts to. I played seasons and seasons and seasons of this game. I got really, really good at this game. So I was better than he was just because, well, I was older and also because I had more time with the game. So when we played, I would always be the crappy team just to make it interesting and competitive. And so in this game, the crappiest team is probably the New England Patriots. If you're a fan of football from the last 20 years, that sounds crazy because the Patriots haven't been a dynasty, but in the early 90s, they were a bad team. They in the game, they have a pink uniform, and I used them recently when I played my son last weekend. I was the Patriots to give him a chance because he had never played the game, which, by the way, he ended up winning because the Patriots suck. But anyway, so the Patriots are running around in pink uniforms, and he's like, is that supposed to be red? Is there something wrong with the game? And I was like, no, their uniforms really were pink at the time. So not that says anything, but at the same time, they were just not a good football team. They're a team of scrubs. So I would use them, and he would use whoever. And then later on, when we were reunited, we spent a whole year playing this game with a neighbor kid who was new to the ways of Tecmo Super Bowl. So he got to be the 49ers because they were the best team. Pretty much, you could argue about who's the best team, but I think in terms of just like offensive weapons, they were really easy to use and really hard to stop. So he would be the 49ers. Sometimes I would be Tampa Bay. who had Vinny Testaverde and had something of a passing game. But if I really wanted to challenge myself, I would be the freaking Patriots, who were terrible. This game led to me discovering Dan Marino and him becoming one of my favorite players of all time. I love being the Dolphins and just throwing long bombs with him. That led to one Christmas I asked for a Dan Marino jersey, and that same Christmas my brother asked for a Deion Sanders jersey, and we cherished those jerseys for a couple of years until we outgrew them. But this game directly influenced our love of the NFL and many of the players in it because we spent so much time playing these players. So talking about players and teams, I recently played, as homework for the pod, which was really just a flimsy excuse for me to play the game. I played a game with every single team in the league. Initially, I played a season with my Detroit Lions, which ended, just like in real life, ended in the NFC Championship game, which I lost. But, in fact, in real life, we lost to the Washington Redskins. In Tecmo Super Bowl, I lost to the 49ers. But in any case, so I recently finished playing a game. I played a single game with every single team in the NFL. And just so I could talk a bit about the best players, the best teams, because I think it's kind of fun to talk about. Like I said, so best teams, I think it's San Francisco is the best team. You got Joe Montana, you got Jerry Rice, you got John Taylor, who's no scrub, and those three guys basically means that they can score at will on offense. They're practically unstoppable. If you load up against the pass and just pick pass plays constantly, they also have running back Roger Craig, who's surprisingly fast and will just devastate you. And they've got some studs on D, so I still think that they're the best team in the game. And when I played them, typically when I played my preseason games, when I played every team in the league, a lot of times I would play the 49ers because I felt like they were the best challenge. And that ended up being true for more times than not. I think Philadelphia's got to be on a list of best teams. And it's funny because it's not like they don't have the best team, like a team concept. They just have one of the best players. Randall Cunningham, he's just dominant in this game. He runs faster than most running backs. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's a cheat code because even if he decides to pass and you cover the pass, he can just decide to scramble and then pick up 30 yards or break a long touchdown, and there's like nothing you can do about it. So he's just like Bo Jackson. He's just one of those players he elevates his entire team. When you talk about best teams, I think the Raiders have to be on that list just because Bo Jackson is so dominant. It's become something of a joke when you talk about Tecmo Bowl. You talk about Bo Jackson being dominant, and but yeah, he is. Like when I played it as the Raiders, I think I rushed for 450 yards with Bo because he's one of the fastest guys in the game. He's shifty. He can run through tackles. And it's just a lethal combination. In fact, the only thing really holding back the Raiders as a team is they also have Marcus Allen, which he's another great running back, but that means that Bo Jackson gets 2 running plays and Marcus Allen gets 2 running plays. So when I played against the Raiders, every time I was on defense, I just picked the Bo Jackson sweep toss play and would just... most of the time, my guys would tackle him for a loss, but he actually did break a couple long runs, including one for a touchdown because he's Bo Jackson. But essentially, I forced them to beat me with Marcus Allen and their passing game, and that didn't work. So Marcus Allen kind of held them back a little bit. Even though Marcus Allen did work, and I think he ended the game with over 100 yards rushing, I won because Bo Jackson didn't go nuts on me. So, yeah, Bo is everything he's built up to be. If you've heard about the game, you've heard about Bo Jackson being incredible. It's all true. He's the most dominant player in the game. But that was a detour I didn't intend on making, but it's kind of hard to not talk about Bo Jackson when you talk about this game, but especially when you talk about the Raiders. But so I'm talking about best teams. Like I said, the Raiders are on that list. The New York Giants their defense is incredible, easily the best defense in the game. I played the Houston Oilers, which that's another throwback to 1991 when they were called the Oilers, and Warren Moon was their quarterback. They're an offensive juggernaut in this game, and they're fun to play. I thought it would be a good matchup, defense versus offense, and I crushed them 70-0. I had so many turnovers on defense, fumble recoveries, interceptions that ended up becoming touchdowns either directly or indirectly a couple plays later. I just totally dominated them. The Giants are just Lawrence Taylor on defense. He's maybe the fastest defensive player in the game. I don't know. It certainly feels like it when you're playing with him, and he runs through guys too. So there's this concept in these Tecmo Bowl games where with a defensive player, if their hitting ability or their tackling ability is high enough, you just run through guys, and the guy you run through just kind of bounces away like several yards, like 10 yards away. He just goes bouncing across the field. In the Tecmo circles, that's called popcorning somebody. Lawrence Taylor popcorns everybody. He doesn't even have to tackle. He doesn't have to dive at someone. He just runs into them, and they basically die on the field. So he's a monster. Their special teams is probably also the best in the game. The way the kick returns work, you kind of live and die by your coverage, and the Giants have great blocking, so when you're receiving the kick, you actually will have a decent return because your blockers are keeping back the opposing team. And then on the other side, when you're kicking the ball, your guys, you'll probably, once the receiver receives the ball, you'll probably have 3 or 4 guys that are like right there ready to tackle him. And I don't believe the Oilers returned any kick for more than like 5 or 10 yards against me because the defense or the special teams were just swarming the ball carrier. And yeah, the team is just suffocating. I kind of wish now I had played the Giants versus the 49ers. I think that'd be another good matchup, but I think I wouldn't doubt if the Giants would come out on top. They also have a great running back in Otis Anderson. He's shifty and fast, so they're a good team. And my fifth best team in my estimation, just based on my experience. And I did play an entire season with them, so I kind of know what I'm talking about with this, and so it might be a little homerism, but the Detroit Lions, they're on this list. I played an entire season with the Lions when I first fired up this game, partially because nostalgic reasons. Barry Sanders is the big reason, but also I wasn't 100% sure if I remembered what the good and bad teams were coming into this replay that I've been doing. I knew the 49ers were amazing. I knew the Patriots and the Bucks were not amazing. And then everything in the middle I kind of wasn't sure about. I kind of thought the Lions were middle of the road because for most of my life they've been middle to bottom of the tiers in terms of how good teams are. But then after I started playing, I remembered that 1991 was the one year up until last year that the Detroit Lions were actually good. They ended up making it to the NFC Championship game that year before losing to Washington, who went on to win the Super Bowl. And this Lions team is actually good. It's funny because there's a bunch of the wide receivers are guys I don't necessarily remember as well because I'm more familiar with someone like Herman Moore or Brett Perriman, who started playing for the Lions in the mid-90s. But the early 90s, they had guys like Robert Clark and some guy named Aubrey Matthews, I think. And I don't remember any of them. In fact, the only person I really remember from this team was Barry Sanders on the offensive side of the ball, and then Rodney Peete, the quarterback. And just like real life, the Lions live and die with Barry, and he's amazing in this game. He's fast, he's shifty, he breaks tackles. He's a clear tier below Bo Jackson in terms of talent, but he's still a lot of fun to use, and I ended up leading the league in rushing by 1,500 yards at the end of the season because he just tore it up. Chris Spielman on defense, got a ton of sacks with him. So Lions have got to be in the mix, I think. And again, though, this could just be the homer and me talking, but they are legitimately good, just like in real life. They don't have Rodney Peete, not a reliable quarterback, so if you need a lot of points in rapid succession because you're behind, you might struggle. And then the secondary is suspect. I had a hard time stopping the 49ers, of all people. When I played them in the NFC Championship game, I had no answer for Jerry Rice and John Taylor, but few teams do. Speaking of, I've talked about players quite a bit. I think the top 5 players, Bo Jackson's number 1. I've spent a long time talking about him. Christian Okoye, He's the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs in this game, and he isn't as fast as Barry Sanders or Bo Jackson, slightly below them in terms of speed, but his hitting power is like 90-something, highest in the game. And I talked about popcorning earlier when I was talking about LT, Lawrence Taylor. Okoye popcorns everybody he runs into almost. It's almost unfair. It feels like a cheat code when you're running into defenders and they're flying like 10 yards away from you. And he's this deadly blend of speed and power that he's a lot of fun to use. Barry Sanders, he's in that list. It's funny that so many of these top players are running backs, but they just, I don't know, they're dominant. I mean, Jerry Rice is awesome in this game, but he doesn't have the opportunity to get the ball as much, I guess, as a running back. So the running backs tend to shine more. At least the running game does when you have great running backs. Randall Cunningham, who in this game, he's known as QB Eagles. So I mentioned at the top of the podcast, Tecmo Super Bowl has the NFL PA license, which allows them to use the player names and quote-unquote likenesses, but they're just 8-bit graphics, so they look nothing like them. Other than the fact that, if he's black in real life, he's black in the game. If he's white in real life, he's white in the game. That's the only real resemblance. Otherwise, they're just pixelated sprites. You can't tell who's who. But they have the names. But Randall Cunningham, Jim Kelly, quarterback of the Buffalo Bills, and Bernie Kosar, quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, none of them were part of the NFLPA agreement, so they are in the game as QB Eagles, QB Bills, and QB Browns. But it's Randall Cunningham if you're familiar with the Eagles at this time, and he's as fast as a running back. He has a cannon for an arm. He's essentially the only thing on Philadelphia. They've got a couple guys, but they live and die with Randall Cunningham, and they still are a dominant team because of him. Like when I was going through my preseason run of playing every team just to take every team for a spin, two players put fear in my heart: Bo Jackson and Randall Cunningham, because both of them were people that could single-handedly just take over the game and just destroy you. And then the fifth best player, the only defensive player on this list, is LT. And whether or not he's fifth or not, he's probably actually like second. I listed him last in this list, but yeah, I mentioned him earlier talking about the Giants. He's an outstanding defensive player. He's a force of nature, just like in real life. Wrapping up here, I mentioned at the top talking about, is this game the best sports game ever? Is it the best NES game ever? I want to kind of run through some things and then give you my opinion. As far as best sports game ever, this is kind of an easy call in my opinion, because most sports games are seasonal, at least these days. So every year you get a new version of Madden, you get a new version of NHL 2K, new version of NBA 2K, FIFA is seasonal, which is good and bad. I guess it's cool because every year you get the updated rosters, but for the games, they feel more iterative. And if you've played a Madden in the last 5 or 10 years, they pretty much feel interchangeable in terms of gameplay. There's always some tweaking, and there's going to be some versions you like better than others, but realistically, if you've played Madden like in the last 15 or 20 years, like you've played Madden, you know what it is. The other thing I do have to wonder is, when we're talking about best sports game, does Mario Kart count? I feel like it's kind of a philosophical question, but I'm going to rule it out, because although it is a racing game, because it's a kart combat game, I'm going to say no, it's not a sports game. Otherwise, that probably would be the answer. It's the best sports game, because I think Mario Kart, all the iterations are great. I'd have a hard time picking my favorite, but Mario Kart is outstanding. I love that game. But I'm going to exclude it because I don't think it's actually a sports game. So what is included? What's kind of my Mount Rushmore of sports games? I think NBA Jam has to be on that list. It's a really great arcade game, specifically playing it in the arcade. I remember when I was in high school, my brother and I used to go play it at this pizza parlor, and it was just one of those games that it's since been ported to consoles, but playing it in the arcade was an experience unlike any other, and it's definitely on the list. But I don't think it's the best sports game. ESPN NFL 2K5. The game came out 20 years ago, and it's routinely held up as the best sports game, or at least best NFL game ever. It was revolutionary in terms of how it presented. It brought like commentators and like it used it took full use of the ESPN license in the presentation, so that you had like kind of a studio set pieces where you would have the commentators talking about the stuff that actually happened in the game or is happening in the league. The gameplay was smooth. It was a great online experience. And yeah, I loved it at the time, but it's been 20 years, so I have a hard time remembering exactly what it felt like. Other than that, I really did love it, but I moved on from it at some point. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!'s got to be in this list. Legendary game. One of the best games for the Nintendo, and just it's iconic for a reason. NHL 94 and /9, I would say 95 also. That game was a real moment. That was kind of my wake up call to how awesome the NHL can be, and another iconic game from this era. And then any of the NBA 2K just as a franchise is a great sports game, but specifically kind of in the late aughts, early like 2010s, like that was kind of like peak NBA 2K era. Specifically I don't know if it was 2K11 or 2K12, the Jordan one with the Jordan on the front. You had the Jordan Experience. That was a great game. And some of the songs that coincide with those games are still like in my head, like the "We're Playing Basketball" song. But yeah, those were outstanding games. But when it comes down to best sports game ever, I think it is Tecmo Super Bowl. I've touched on a lot of why I like this game, but the telling factor for me, as of all the games I've listed, Tecmo Super Bowl is the only one that I continue to revisit. I'm addicted to it right now. Like, if I can't imagine myself being super excited to like fire up ESPN NFL 2K5 right now, but I would totally just go in the other room and play some Tecmo Super Bowl, because it's this magical alchemy of fast gameplay and just enough like reality in terms of these are the teams and these are the players, and then it's kind of got that cool retro vibe, and the gameplay is fast and it's fun, and I don't know, the fact that you can pick it up and play a whole game in like 15 minutes. And by the way, we haven't even really talked about the 2-player aspect of the game. It really, it's fun to beat up on the computer, take advantage of them, and destroy them mercilessly. But then sometimes they surprise you. But really, the game comes alive when you play it against another human, and that's when the games get tense. And on defense, you tend to play, at least on defense, I tend to play bend don't break defense, where I'll take like a linebacker or a safety and just try and prevent the home run plays, unless I have someone really fast like an LT or something like that, with whom I will rush the quarterback and try and sack. But even then, a lot of times I might fall back and just try and mix it up, and you definitely play a different game, a more defensive game when you're playing against another person, and the game just shines. I can see why the Tecmo Bowl tournaments are so popular, because there's a certain kind of energy that comes from going head to head against another person. So I think Tecmo Super Bowl is the best sports game ever, which is pretty remarkable because it's over 30 years old. Is it the best Nintendo game ever? This is a tougher call in my opinion, because the Nintendo Entertainment System roster of games is stacked. I mentioned Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! I think that game is in the contention, in the mix. Contra has sentimental value and has the legendary cheat code that most gamers know, even if they've never played the game. Up, down, left, right, BA, start. I used to always think it was select start for some reason, but apparently it's just start. The Super Mario Brothers games, especially Super Mario Brothers 3, that game is incredible. Of course, you got to talk about Legend of Zelda, and for me, that game has a strong nostalgic value, and the gameplay still holds up. I played it last week just because I had the opportunity to, and it's still a great game. And then, of course, Tecmo Super Bowl is in the mix, I fully believe. This one's a hard call for me. My heart wants to say Tecmo Super Bowl, and especially because this is a Tecmo Super Bowl podcast. But I kind of think Super Mario Bros. 3 is the ultimate Nintendo game. It's unrivaled as a platformer. Even later games, like I loved Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. Like that was a real like holy crap moment when I played it. Because the graphics, the 16-bit graphics were so crisp and the gameplay was fun, and you had things like Yoshi introduced to the equation. But Super Mario Bros. 3, I feel like is the ultimate, the best Mario game. And if it's in a race with Tecmo Super Bowl, I think it beats it by a nose. It's just a little more timeless. I think it's the ultimate expression of the genre, the platformer genre, and it's the best Nintendo game. I can admit that to you. But Tecmo Super Bowl is in the mix, and not for nothing, it's the game I'm addicted to. Now, granted, I have been playing the original Nintendo. I have been playing the original Mario Brothers recently, and my plan was maybe I'll beat all 3 Mario Brothers in a row, and I kind of forgot how difficult the original Mario Brothers is. So I've made it to like World 3, and there's no save state or anything. So when you die, you die. So it's going to be a while before I get to Super Mario Bros. 3 and can really properly say, yeah, it's the best game. But it is. Like I know it is. But Tecmo Super Bowl, outstanding game. And the fact that it holds up so well, even 30 years later, and it lives on. There's an online community that loves it. I mentioned that there's a number of updated ROMs you can download that have new versions. So I mentioned the game is set up for the 1991 season with 1991 teams, 1991 divisions. But if I go on the internet, which I'm going to do here in a little bit, and download the 2024 ROM, it'll have the NFL as it looks today, with the players on the teams that they should be on, and guys like Barry Sanders will be long retired, and that staying power. People love this game for a reason. You don't see people modding Tecmo Super Bowl 2 from the NES era because we moved on. That game was not magical. Tecmo Super Bowl tapped into something and was this. It was this, I keep saying the word magical, but I don't know how else to describe it. It was a magical moment in terms of what a game could be, what it could feel like, how it could replicate the real experience of being in the NFL, but at the same time, really celebrate the game aspect. I think if you talk about what's more accurate, Tecmo Super Bowl or Madden, what's a more accurate representation of the NFL? Obviously Madden is, but I feel like that pursuit of verisimilitude, that pursuit of accuracy, gameplay is sacrificed, and you'll have no better experience playing a football game than you will in Tecmo Super Bowl. It's not accurate because you can hike the ball as a quarterback, run back 40 yards to the back of your end zone, and then throw a ball over 100 yards to the opposite end zone. No quarterback in history has ever been able to do that. You can do that in this game. So yes, it is arcadey, but that just adds to the fun. This game is something you pick up and play, and it's just such a great time. I love it. So that's the Tecmo Super Bowl episode. I'm surprised it went as long as it did. I thought this was going to be like a half-hour episode, but apparently I've reached the stage of podcasting where if you put a mic in my face, I don't know how to shut up. But that's it for this episode. Come back next week. I'll be joined by Sheila Motion talking about Hacks from HBO. It's a hilarious comedy, and can't wait to dig into that with her. Until next time, peace out.